Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And hopefully, we're going to be here to unpack what cluster coordination means in practice. And we'll look at the impact that it has on securing quality education for children in crises, and also for how that helps amplify the impact for education cannot wait investments. So let's not forget what's at stake here in terms of what we're doing and why it's important for coordination. And I don't know if any of you have seen this canvas before, but it's artwork done from, these are handprints from children in Geneva. And there's also some comments from children from Cox's Bazar about why education is important to them. And the point really there is that notwithstanding where you are in the world, children want the same thing, which is an education. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. One child, Nurija in Cox's Bazar, said education is something which helps us to know the unknown. Very profound. And another Ruskan, who's 10, said education will bring me the knowledge which will bring betterment for me, my parents, and my community. So that was just to say that investing in education and investing in coordination so that we can have a better quality response is important. Why are education clusters critical? Well, first of all, let me explain the cluster approach. There are 11 clusters in humanitarian architectures. This is shown on the slide here. And there are activated clusters in 27 contexts, 27 countries and 3 hubs, which I believe there's also a map for. It's just worth noting as well that when we're talking about cluster, it can also be, depending on where you are, it can be called a working group, an EIE working group, or a sector. So, but overall, we are the Global Education Cluster. We're co-led by Save the Children and UNICEF, and it was founded in 2007. So that's just a little bit of background, and I'll move back over here. So basically, what do we do? The education cluster is here to ensure a coordinated, evidence-based, coordinated, inclusive and participatory and protective education response, which is why, and it can be a really powerful platform to amplify partners' strengths, make sure that we play to everybody that's been working in the coordination and play to their strengths so that they can deliver education in the best way possible. Ultimately, education ensures that more children and young people can access education, safe and quality and protective. And it's a priority, as we heard, from children themselves, from their families and for communities. So today we're going to unpack what that means. And we're very fortunate to have a great panel. At the end, we've got Afsun Ilhun, who is from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. We've got Fadi Baidoun, the coordinator in occupied Palestinian territories. And we're also very fortunate to have a child and youth delegate who I'll call on first to speak about why education is important. So first, I would like to introduce you to Nafisa from Nigeria. Thank you. Over to you.
I am Nafisa, a girl champion with Save the Children and also a member of Children's Parliament in Nigeria. Today, I am here to talk about demystifying coordination. Why are education clusters integral to achieving education cannot wait mission? Voices of homeless, refugee, and displaced children, crying daily in camps, host communities, some in captivity with horrific traumatic experiences as a result of conflict, armed wars, and natural disaster. We are experiencing the worst level of conflict we have ever seen in Nigeria. An alarming and massive humanitarian and protection crisis has been brought on by the ongoing conflict in northeast Nigeria, forcing millions of people into survival mode. In 2022, 12.8 million of people are in need of humanitarian aid. Northeast Nigeria remains one of the world's largest humanitarian crisis area, with 8.1 children that are in need of assistance in 2023. As children, we learn teamwork and discipline through education, which is fundamental for our future and the development of our country. When we become adults, we learn to communicate and cooperate with each other when we are at an early age of our education. That is why education cannot wait. The ideal of cooperation and collaboration is at the heart of finding solutions to education in emergencies. With the international ed sector knowing that no one can address all educational issues on their own. Education is vital as the whole world deals with escalating armed conflicts, natural disaster brought on by climate change, forceful displacement, prolonged natural disaster, and unprecedented humanitarian crisis. The question to ponder on is this: how can we encourage our stakeholders more successfully to address these challenges? The coordination of education in emergencies is a factor in the solution. Coordination aims to make international humanitarian community better organized, more accountable and professional, so that it can be a better partners for affected people, host governments, local authorities, local societies, and resourcing partners. The major role of education cannot wait is to bring all relevant stakeholders on education to contribute to enhancing and quality education. On this note, I would like to call on the government, public and private donors, UN agencies, civil society organizations, and other humanitarian and development aid actors to come together to ensure increased access to quality and inclusive basic education, mental health and psychosocial support, and vocational opportunities for crisis-affected girls and boys in self-learning environments in Nigeria and the world at large. Governments should provide funding so that low-income education institutions can purchase and encourage children to continue studying. Some children abandon their education because they find learning uninteresting anymore. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nafisa. That was fantastic. And I'm sure you've made a powerful comment for everybody here, could hear in the room. So thank you very much. And thank you. And now I'm going to call on Serafina, who joins us from South Sudan and who's a youth advocate to talk about.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm an athlete and I don't love sitting. I prefer standing. Once again, thank you. I'm Sarafina from South Sudan in a small village in Jonglei State. In 2013, I was displaced to a refugee camp in Aro district. It was really hard coping up in a new place. I made it back to South Sudan in 2020, where I worked at a hospital called Bor Referral Hospital as a nurse. I worked for a couple of months, but unfortunately, one evening, a girl of 13 to 15 years old came to the hospital in a labor pain. I happened to be on duty. When she came in, we tried help her, but it was unfortunate. She lost both herself and the baby. It really touched my heart, and I realized that actually being a nurse wasn't enough for me to advocate on education to the girls in South Sudan. So in 2021, I joined a vocational training center, and I did a welding course, which was actually never done by any female in South Sudan, of which I happen to be the first South Sudanese female welder. It wasn't easy for me because in my country it is so much disappointing most of the times. We girls have been underrated. So coming to class or making anything like joining class all the time, my teachers and my classmates will always discourage me. But I had to double my effort and lead them in class. We graduated and I was their leader. So when I went out, I opened a vocational, I opened a welding workshop and employed 2 youth who worked as my employees. But still, those 2 were not enough. I had to start my advocacy because my mission of going into doing welding was not just to employ the youth, but to advocate. So I went out, started my advocacy, and the only way I could make it was to bring in some motivative name. So I called it Anama Mara Circuit. Anama Mara Circuit, when it is translated in English, I'm not just a woman. So when I started it, a few never, majority did not turn up because when they hear it's a female advocate, everyone will be like, "What am I going to say? What is she going to say? And how important is her message?" So the turn up was really poor. I had almost gave up, but I'm not just a woman kept me on. So at one point, I had to collaborate with some local artists that they loved. I organized some musical concert, and a great number turned up. When I came on stage, everyone was like, "Ah, she's just a woman," and almost everyone left. So when I was like, "Okay, I'm here only for the girls and the women. If you men are not interested, fine, you're allowed to go." So they were like, "Okay, what are you going to tell us?" I told them I'm here advocating on early marriages. I advocated, and some other girls came up, and even everyone came in. So when that happened, I really started the campaign and I continued. But still, the challenge of me being a girl or Mama Rasaki just being a company, being okay, a small campaign group being formed by a woman, I still do have those challenges. And I still appeal that as we continue, the Mama Rasaki and the South Sudanese girls will really have that time for education.
That was really good. Great. Thank you so much, Sarafina, as well. That was a really powerful testimony as well from both of you. And I think that's really framed both the importance of education for children and youth and continuing education. So now we will hear a little bit more from cluster coordinators themselves. And my first question will go to Fadi to talk a little bit about his experience in Palestine and how you sort of work to get partners on the same page to deliver a good quality education response.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Sarafina. And thank you, Nafisa, for those powerful messages as well. I'm coming from Palestine, a country that has been occupied for at least 75 years, with a protracted crisis that is now framed as a protection crisis. A country where thousands of kids are not allowed to safely access education. And this is compounded as well by budget deficits of our government, so that children are really accessing schools, thousands of them, with really poor physical environments and poor protection standards as well. So that's why we're here as a cluster. First of all, we're here to really support collectively achieving the education dreams of youth and children, such as Safina and Nefisa, and to advocate on their behalf for the really ability to safely access quality education from early childhood up till they graduate. So talking about clusters, I can see that I have seasoned cluster coordinators at the room, but I also know that perhaps some of us are not really aware of the cluster approach. So as a cluster, what do we do? Clusters really bring all actors, education and emergencies actors in our country, under one umbrella. So in Palestine, we have more than 60 NGOs, UN agencies, ministries, and other stakeholders that we bring together as a group First of all, to assess and identify the needs on the ground through different tools, mainly through consultation with youth and children in the affected communities, so that we collectively agree on needs and agree on priorities. And based on this collective analysis, we together build the response that would respond to the needs identified by the children and by the youth in the country. So those 60 stakeholders, which are mainly the majority of education stakeholders in the country, are on the same page in terms of needs, in terms of the response. So this is very critical, and I think it's the heart of the response in every country. On top of that, we ensure that we also follow the same standards on different issues. So the cluster helps all its partners through tip sheets, through guidance notes, to ensure, for example, that affected population and children are consulted throughout the project management cycle. We do produce, with partnership with specialized agencies, tip sheets and guidance note on how to ensure disability inclusion in our projects across the response. Same for gender mainstreaming, and same for protection mainstreaming as well, so that we do no harm in any of our response initiatives. I want to give an example coming from Palestine on how did we respond in COVID-19. So building on the tools I've discussed, the cluster has worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Education, which is also in the room, of Palestine. And we built together, based on the needs analysis, a very quick, rapid response plan. And we brought together all development and humanitarian actors on the same table, discussed it with them, agreed with them on its priorities. And the cluster, based on that, formed different thematic groups that followed the fundraising and the implementation of the different interventions. So we formed groups for mental health, we formed a group for hygiene, we formed a group for infrastructure of schools, for distance learning, and the cluster has coordinated the efforts of every group to ensure that the money is going into the right direction to the most marginalized children, and that we do fundraise and advocate for the need per each sector for every child in Palestine. One important aspect that we work on as clusters as well is advocacy. In Palestine, the cluster is leading on monitoring and reporting on all attacks on education. So as I've said, it's a country under occupation, and many educational institutes and children are facing attacks and violations on education. So we, as a cluster, do monitor the incidents, we report on them, and most importantly, we bring partners together to respond to the impacts of those incidents. So the cluster might trigger an incident after an attack on a school, do a needs analysis, and then ask partners to respond based on that need analysis and coordinate the small response as well. And using the evidence and data we generate, we do a lot of advocacy to diplomatic missions across the world, to the international community, to ensure that they know exactly what is happening, provide data and evidence, and help them also in their own advocacy initiatives. So in a nutshell, we're here for the children. We're here to ensure that children are protected through collective efforts. Children do have the safe access to infrastructure and to the education facilities that they deserve, and so that no child is left behind and no child is out of school. Thank you.
Thanks, Fadi, for sharing your reflections on Palestine and the response and advocacy you do there. As you're aware, in many of the contexts that we work in the activated clusters, there are seasonal or regular cyclical emergencies. So it's not sufficient just to respond, we also need to be prepared. And so I'm going to ask Efsun to tell us a little bit about what they do in Cox's Bazar to prepare for the crisis.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Fadi, and thank you, Nafisa and Safina, for the very inspirational and powerful speech. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for being in here with us today. So I would like to give just a bit of background information about the Cox's Bazar response. I'm pretty sure some of us have seen the video that has been shown yesterday in one of the panel. So as of 2017, there are around 740,000 Rohingya people displaced from Myanmar to Cox's Bazar, which is southeastern part of Bangladesh. And they are settled in 33 camps in two sub-districts of Cox's Bazar, actually, called Ukiya and Teknaf. And as of 2023, the number is increased to around 1 million. And 55% of them are below 18. That means that there is a huge need of education response in those 33 camps. However, as my colleague Fadi already covered so many aspects about how the coordination functions and what we do in general, I'll just touch base about the preparedness part and what we do in Cox's Bazar based on the context that we work in. Cox's Bazar is an area which is highly affected by several multi-hazards, such as fire, cyclone, flood, and etc. And because of the establishment, the infrastructure of our learning spaces being made up by bamboo, because that is the only material that we are allowed to use to be able to establish a learning space, we have to be very cautious and very careful about how to protect those learning spaces and how to ensure the safety of learning spaces. So in order to be able to respond to that, we do not just respond after the hazards happen, but also before the hazard. Therefore, together with our sector partners, we have established a working group to manage the disasters that has been impacting our learning spaces. That is called Disaster Risk Management Working Group. And we have identified an emergency focal point for each camp. So each 33 camps, there is an emergency focal point. And we also do early warning reports to all our sector partners. We know the fire season, and we know the cyclone season, and we know the monsoon season, and we know the other possible hazards that might happen. So what we do, we provide the early warning reports, and then we gather all together and discuss about how we can actually ensure that we can protect our learning spaces. Also, how during such situations, also our learning spaces actually support the community as a temporary shelter as well, because it's one of the most solid structure that we have actually. Learning spaces are one of the most solid structure inside the camps. So basically, I would say in a nutshell, in a very summary way, this is also what we do as part of preparation. And why we do that, why we do not just leave it to individual partner, because we want to be sure that all learning spaces are protected equally. We are aware that if there is any kind of damage, so that we can immediately go and respond. Basically, this is why we are establishing those working groups and monitoring everything, so that we can actually access and reach everywhere that is basically requiring that need, that preparedness. Thank you.
Thanks, Efsun. So now we're also going to look at the fact that education clusters, since this is an ECW conference, we're going to look at how clusters can support and amplify the response for the Education Can Wait investments. So specifically, education clusters can facilitate conversations between partners, the prioritization between partners, both for first emergency response windows as well as the multi-year resilience program. So first of all, Fadi, could you just outline a little bit about how you've supported the first emergency response in Palestine?
Thank you, Michelle. During most of my side meetings in the last 2 days, mainly donors have been asking, what kind of relationship you guys as clusters have with ECW in the field? Are you complementing each other, or there is a duplication of effort? And the answer is, in a summary, no, that we are complementing each other. Why? Because clusters are coordinating the response in the country, and ECW is coming to support this response. As many of you already know, ECW supports countries through two different mainstreams. One is the multi-year resilience program, and the other is the first emergency response window. So the multi-year resilience program is more of the longer-term multi-year program that ECW supports. And the entry level for this support of ECW has always been the clusters. As we've said before, clusters do bring everyone together to identify needs and develop a mutual collective response plan. And ECW has always came to support, partly at least, this response plan. So we're in sync in terms of interventions and in terms of objectives as well. Clusters have always facilitated ECW's work through also meeting point with partners, ensuring that ECW really knows which partners have the geographical coverage and the capacity to support the interventions that they've designed within their program. FERs, which I'm going to focus more on, are the shorter term support that ECW brings to the countries in the aftermath of an emergency. So, for example, in Palestine, we had one ECW FER following a Gaza escalation, a huge escalation that took place around a year and a half ago. This escalation has left hundreds of schools damaged through bombardments and airstrikes. So the way we work with ECW closely is that the cluster team has worked with multiple partners to develop an assessment team that consisted of 25 different people who have went to the field and assessed the level of damages of those hundreds of schools and reported back to all its partners, including ECW, on the physical needs, and also in support with the protection cluster, we've identified the well-being needs of children very quickly. And based on this assessments, many partners came in to respond, including ECW. So the cluster has supported ECW and worked hand in hand with them to design a 3-month response through this FER. And based on this 3-month response proposal, we got a good amount of money to respond to the damaged needs of schools and to respond to psychosocial and well-being needs of thousands of children in Gaza. And the cluster has also facilitated the role of ECW through the expression of interest to partners, and have created an independent neutral committee to review all the proposals coming to partners. And we've agreed and selected together with ECW the most capable partners with the best quality proposals to really respond to the needs in Gaza. And this all happened in the matter of a few days. And we were able to really rehabilitate hundreds of schools through the support of ECW first and other partners as well. I hope this answered your question, Michelle.
Great. Yes, it did. Thank you very much. And now, Efsun, it would be great if you could do a similar thing, but take you through your experience with the multi-year resilience program in Bangladesh.
Sure. As my colleague Fadi already mentioned, the structure of how basically MERP, FAIR, and cluster coordination is linked, I will try to elaborate it with some more examples from Cox's Bazar in particular. As mentioned by my colleague Fadi, is that MYRP is very much designed based on the education sector / cluster priorities and response plan that we have. And how do we have this response plan? It's through basically the needs assessment that we have, and together with our sector partners, we decide based on the analysis that we have the sector's priority response areas for the upcoming year or upcoming 2 years and 3 years. And we do it in 2 ways actually. One is through humanitarian program cycle that we do every year, and depending on the context, sometimes it can be also multi-year. We analyze the needs and then we draft a humanitarian response plan, and that is an education sector / cluster strategy. But also as education sector, we do have, for example, a 3-year sector strategy that has been standing there, and we basically update it or work on it again every 3 years in order to be able to foresee what is upcoming and what are the things that we need to really focus on and how we can advocate for those things together with donors and etc. And MYRP MERP, which is very, very much designed based on the education sector strategy that we have. And why MERP is very important for us, for the clusters or sectors, is because it first of all, as Fadi already mentioned, it has a wider approach. So we are able to reach many partners through MERP, and it also really that means that it really supports education sector standardized approach a lot, because we standardize many things, which I will be elaborating a bit more. For example, in 2017 and 18, education sector of Cox's Bazar tried to produce a curriculum for the learners, because there was no curriculum for us to be able to use. We were not able to use Myanmar curriculum. We were not able to use Bangladeshi curriculum. So we were just stuck there. And together with all sector partners, we use their existing capacity to be able to produce a learning competency framework to be able to basically provide that curriculum to partners. However, that took already so much time, and plus we had to implement that curriculum in order to be able to see the impact of that curriculum, in order to be able to expand that response. And in that time, we had the MERP from 2018 to 2021, which really supported us to be able to basically implement and expand the response and see the impact of the response. If it was only a 1-year project, we wouldn't be able to see the impact. Well, by the time we produce the curriculum and try to implement, it would already finish. And in addition to that, because MERP is very much based on the education sector strategy and very much based on the education sector standards, it really helps us to basically ensure an equal, a standardized response as well. Like, for example, in Cox's Bazar, we have 3 grantees under MERP, and these 3 grantees they are one of the biggest partners that we have, and those grantees have their own also implementing partners under MERP as well, which really helps us to be able to standardize. And in addition to that, I would like to also give an example about the cost per learner. As education sector, we identify the cost per learner based on the need, based on the inflation, based on the contextualized situation. So if I ask Fadi the cost per learner in Palestine, I'm pretty sure it's very different than what we have in Cox's Bazar. And ECW is using our cost per learner standard. And this really also helps us to have a coordinated and harmonized approach. And why this is very important is because, let's say my cost per learner is $100, capturing certain things, including maybe a preparedness and etc. But then one partner is basically doing $200 as a cost per learner, providing more shiny things, maybe uniforms and etc. that we don't have, or paying more to teachers, and then that creates tension in the community. That creates an unfair situation in the community that is very, very difficult to mitigate. And let us also not forget that we have commitments to the country officials that we work, like we are also very much bounded with them. So we have to ensure those standardization. And because ECW, MERP using our standards, this really also helps us to sustain the response and ensure that we equally respond to all the children who needs, and harmonize the response very well. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both, Fadi and Efson. I think they've highlighted very well how important it is to have an evidence-based coordinated response, both in terms of being able to respond to attacks on education, be prepared for cyclones, ensure a standard curriculum. These are all just examples of how, and also stop things like early marriage, which you've referred to earlier. So thank you. With that in mind, I think we're going to go to a Q&A, but I will first ask Nafisa and Sarafina if either of you would like to ask a question first. You want? Yes. Please, would you like to ask a question?
No, you ask me a question, not me asking you.
Oh, sorry. I ask you a question? Okay, I can do that. In your experience growing up in South Sudan, did you see any evidence of coordination, of education, yeah, did you see any evidence of coordination in evidence?
Yeah, I did, and that was actually with the NRC, with this project of Empower. They really did great, and especially at the vocational centers, and they did a great coordination where at least a few, let me say, recently a few girls, or like about 15 or 16 girls, are able to do some main job, not like of the recent of the previous number of South Sudanese outdrops, where it was about 2.8 million children, of which the 53% were girls. When the Empower plus PNH, PIN Church Aids, in collaboration with NRC and also other NGOs, when they came in, at least a number of girls were, that was the first, and then they followed.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. Are there any other questions from the audience, Anna?
It's actually a lot of a comment more than a question. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Dima Mammar. I'm a Palestinian. I grew up in Gaza Strip, and that's one of the reasons I was really excited to come here, to attend this session. Since finally a case about Palestine has been raised, then I would just like to express my frustration about how everyone, when they were announcing their pledges, when they were giving their when they're leading the panel discussions and everything, not even a single word about Palestine or about the struggle that we Palestinians go through. This is very disappointing. Every time you talk about war, you connect it to Ukraine, but everyone is forgetting the fact that we have lived through this war for more than 73 years till now, and we're not even acknowledged. All the discussions that involves Palestine, for me, they feel like, does Israel have the right to kill Palestinians or not? It doesn't say about how we can stop it or nothing. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's not politics anymore, and it has nothing to do with religion. Why no one is talking about it at all? Today a whole session have been held to talk about conflict, to talk about displacement, and not even a single word about Palestine. It hurts my feelings so much as a Palestinian who went through a lot and then come here, and even a chance for us to speak and to have our voices amplified is not available. So that's something I wanted to express. And now for everyone here, please take a moment and just think, why are we not talking about Palestine? What is stopping you? If we're gonna keep going after our interest and being like, oh, this topic is controversial, or this topic is a bit complicated and I'm not really aware enough, we're not gonna make any change. We're just gonna give more and more power to the oppressor to practice their cruel regime on us, and our children will not get a chance to learn, will not get a chance to see anything in the world. We as children in Gaza are always forced to grow up, and our childhood is literally not there. It does not exist, because since we are young, all we see is ashes, bodies scattered all around, and smoke. All we hear is bombs, and all we do is just to mourn the loss of our loved ones. I think, especially in such important events, there should be a huge highlight and on the topic of Palestine. So please, everyone here, talk about Palestine and don't forget this. And Palestinians can't wait to learn too. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that important point. And yes, there are so many crises, and a lot of crises need to be mentioned and highlighted and issued again. I don't know if Fadi, you want to say anything in response or about advocacy and what more we can do as even as the education cluster to raise the profile of Palestine. But certainly at our level, we recognize there's more to be done.
No, I have two hats to wear here. As a Palestinian, I can't but to agree with everything you've said. It is frustrating to see that the world has really erupted too many crises that Palestine has been neglected right now. We're talking about 2030 and the SDGs, and we can see that we're not really going towards any of our targets, but it is the opposite, unfortunately. As a cluster coordinator now, I'll talk about advocacy, and it is critical. The work of the cluster in generating evidence and information and publishing advocacy briefs on attacks on education, on the right of every Palestinian child to education, on ending the blockade on Gaza and its effect on children's well-being and education is critical. And what we need from the international community, from our donors and diplomatic missions, is to really get this information out through their capitals and to really ensure that we end the occupation in Palestine and we ensure that every Palestinian child do have access to safe and quality education at the end. So thank you.
Thank you. I've got two questions. Is there any more, just so I manage my time? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Leandro Salazar, Regional Education Advisor for NRC in Western Central Africa. Coordination is a big word, and I'm glad we're having the discussion here with the education cluster, because I have the impression or the feeling that humanitarian development actors are not communicating at all with regards to education. And we remain in this endless cycle of responding to emergencies year after year, HNO after HNO, HRP after HRP, without necessarily witnessing results. I have to say, we have to be honest. Education being such a complex topic requires coordination among EI actors, among systems, among sectors as well, and also, of course, the leadership and ownership of governments and Ministry of Education in particular. I think the MYRP is a good platform to articulate the different interventions of actors, systems, sectors as well. And I think ECW provides very good support, and I'm very grateful, of course, to the work of the education cluster in each of the countries that I have the, let's say, the honor to work with. My question specifically is with regards to durable solutions. What are we doing as education cluster to make sure that the Ministry of Education play its role of leader, of owner of the education system in some context, and we can finally achieve durable solutions with support, of course, of the education sector and education actors, development actors in general. Just the question for the cluster. Thank you.
Maybe I can take two more. Yeah, let's just take the questions so we can manage.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I'm Helle Gudmansen. I am Save the Children, Head of Education in Save Denmark. Thank you very much for your interventions, and thank you for the two of you for these we've seen such strong young women, and it's been really fantastic. And can I please say, I think you're absolutely right, and I think maybe Yemen would feel the same here. And that is the big issue. And I think we are trying very hard because, of course, we all cry for Ukraine. But we do need to make sure that no crises are forgotten because no children should be forgotten. So please know that we try to tell the politicians in the donor countries. Thanks. I want to ask you a question because Michelle and the two of you I know that localization is something that is quite higher up in your agenda as a global cluster and each cluster. So maybe if you would give a few words to how do you try to ensure localization, ensure that we hear the voices of children and youth and local voices all together partners. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to take two more questions and then. Did you have your hand?
My question will be related to this MYRP, especially the resilience part, that how we bring the resilience in the system, because if these protected and long-term issues are coming, so we need to also work on the resilience of the system. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Edwin. I work for IFRC. One was on localization, but it's already been covered. So I'll ask, I'm really happy to hear that you're already dealing with the standardization, especially in Cox's Bazar. This question goes specifically to IFSAN. What about teacher incentives? Have you succeeded to do anything about? Because I moved around many countries, and in terms of standardization, that's a very big issue that people are not able to meet.
Okay. Do you want to take a couple of questions each?
If you want to start, I can.
Whatever you want.
You can start and I can.
I'll start with the important question coming from NRC. It's an important one that goes even beyond this room and beyond the education cluster in particular. But we definitely have a role, right? Every one of us have a role in ensuring nexus and trying to bring actors together. So thank you for the question again. As education cluster in Palestine, I'll give a few examples at my level at least, and then perhaps others can also contribute to this important discussion. As you've said, development and humanitarian actors have not been really coordinated or have been speaking together in the last few years. But under the Nexus agenda, we were able to first of all ensure that the education cluster has a chair, has a seat in the education sector working group, where development actors are sitting together and coordinating. So I have a standing agenda item as a cluster coordinator to ensure that the humanitarian needs are being raised there and to try to coordinate the response between the development and humanitarian actors in the country. As well, we have also a very close relationship with the ministry to ensure that education emergencies needs in areas where they also have limited access to is still embedded within their work plans, and they are accountable under the education sector working group to support us in responding to those needs as well. On top of this, I do a lot of advocacy with donors, where I believe that a lot of the division is coming from on really coordinating among themselves and coming as development and humanitarian donors to the table with a unified vision and support as well. So those things are like at my level, at a country level, that we're trying to really contribute to the Nexus agenda through and to ensure that we can really take those baby steps towards ensuring that both corners of the response are really coordinated. On the second question on localization, if I haven't answered your question at my level, at least I will go back to you. Localization is very high on the agenda, as you've said, at a global level and also at a country level. At a country level in OPT, we have done a lot to ensure that national NGOs and communities are really an integral part of our needs analysis and response. So first of all, I've been running around different national NGO coordination forums in the last few years to really orient everyone on what is the education cluster, what kind of contribution they can have within the education cluster. And since then, we have like really a high number of national NGOs that are part of the education cluster now, and they can really share the information and be an integral part of the discussion when we talk about needs and response. We've empowered national NGOs as well through different capacity building platforms to be really able to advocate for the rights of the children and to be also able to access different funding opportunities, including the Humanitarian Pool Fund, which now in Palestine is really supporting through a huge percentage national NGOs directly. And I'm proud to say that most of the funds to the HPF are now going to national NGOs as well. One other initiative that we've been taking is to bring youth and children of Palestine every now and then to cluster meetings so that their voices can be heard and they can be part of the discussion and they can ensure that their needs from their perspective is being discussed at the education cluster level and that we are able to respond to them and be accountable towards them. So those are small examples of how we do localization at a country level.
Fantastic. I think we're at time, so you've got can we have 2 more minutes just to quickly do the resilience and standardization? I'm sorry.
Sorry, apologies.
Sorry,
I missed the resilience question. So
maybe that was covered a little bit in durable solutions.
okay,
Fine.
so maybe I can answer the incentives question. Thank you very much for actually bringing that. And this is exactly what we were mentioning about the standardization approach, right? So just a bit of background information about the incentives of teachers. Education sector in Cox's Bazar, they have a standardized incentive scale for each teacher based on their level and etc. We have the guidance and everything endorsed by education sector partners and also the authorities on the ground. However, because some of the partners decided to pay based on what they want to pay, this created tension on the ground where government officials had to write a statement saying that this is the amount you can pay, which was lower than education standards, and you cannot go beyond that. And this created so much, of course, like unhappiness and unsatisfaction on the ground, where we had to advocate again with intersector coordination group for all the incentive payments together, and again re-identify in advocacy with government saying that, okay, this is not really helping, we need to really come up with something else. And after months of work, months of back and forth discussion with partners, with strategic advisory groups, all the sectors, and also all the sector coordinators, we finally endorsed incentive payment, both for teachers and other volunteer workers as well. And now the identification is basically mainly based on semi-skilled and skilled level of the teachers. But in consultation with the teachers, we finally came up with a common proposed solution that is basically made both teachers and the government officials and everyone happier than before. Let me put it that way. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Was there any other question? There is one.
Rifat is insisting, so let's give him the floor.
Sorry, I hope you don't mind. I've been told to ask one final question.
Just because Fadi, he tried to put the localization in such frame, I do believe that the localization is concept. It's linked with the power relation. We have to be very careful as international organization when we are acting in the countries or clusters to be very careful regarding the power relation. Even the gender, the people, when you mention gender, they thought it's women's rights. It's not. It is the power relation between women and women, men and women and women, men and men, south and north, black and white. It is the system. So we have, when we are working in the cluster, we have to look at the system. So I do believe, because we are working in a crisis, the immunity is very important to give it to the local organization. In the crisis, I am from Palestine. I know how the local organization work when there is a crisis. The international organization, they are very good in supporting, in being in partnership with the local organization, because all of us work at the same goal at the end. But in the crisis, the local organization who is in the front. And we know much more than the international organization or the donors how we can reach our goal. Don't push us as you think. They came with some ideas and, okay, go now. How I can go? Where is the war? Where is their bombing? You have, so that the local organization, you have to trust them and to give them the immunity for that. The solidarity concept is very important. I think in the last 3 years after the pandemic, I am afraid that we start to lose this really concept. It's a human value that we have to get it again as people who really, all of us, work for justice. Thank you.
I think that's a really powerful and positive note to end on in terms of solidarity and working in partnership, which is what coordination is about. So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Nafisa, Sarafina, Fadi and Efsun for everything. And yeah, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. It's been a great session. So hopefully they've helped debunk coordination a little bit and demystify it a little bit and given some good inspiring examples of how it can help. And thank you to you for your comment on solidarity and to you for your comment as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a good Thanks both. Thank you so much. That was really powerful, both of you. Let me shake both of your hands. That's brilliant, really great. Thank you so much. Really great.